a second, this isn't right. There we go. Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing really well. So you might be able to tell that it's my birthday. You may be able to tell further that it's a pretty special one. And so, because despite my great age, I am still a big kid at heart, I wanted to do a little bit of a bookish birthday celebration video. The concept of this video is pretty simple and straightforward. I am going to be taking every year that I have been living on this planet and choosing a recommendation of a book that was published in that year for you all to maybe peruse, if you will, at your leisure. Very easy premise, so let's just get straight on into the years and the book recommendations. So the year of my birth was 1995, and my book recommendation for this year is Wicked, The Life and the Times of the Wicked Witch of the West by Gregory Maguire, which feels like a pretty apropos recommendation considering the musical to which this book is based is really the musical that really kickstarted my love of musical theatre. I'd always loved musical movies in the past, but this was the first stage production that I ever saw in the West End, and it really lit a fire under me. The book is quite different, it is darker, it is definitely much more political, but I still think worth a read. 1996 we have A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin, which yes, just goes to show how long this series has been ongoing. And will the end ever be in sight? 1997, my recommendation is The Lottie Project by Jacqueline. Not only is the main character called Charlotte, but I have a sneaking suspicion is also what kickstarted my love of history. For 1998, my recommendation is Holes by Louise, one of the very first successful books that I had to read in school. Successful in that every kid who read this really enjoyed it, and especially we loved watching the film. And I watched it recently, and it still holds up. For 1999, I had a choice between two very teen-focused books. It was a choice between a very American one and a very British one, and I've gone with the very British one, and I will be recommending Angus, Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging by Louise Rennison, the book series which really influenced all millennial teenagers. Do I still have the different steps of the snogging scale very much ingrained in my brain? Maybe. For the year 2000 we have The Secret Dreamworld of a Shopaholic by Sophie Kinsella. Another very pivotal instrumental series when I was a teenager, which yes, was meant to be teaching me very good lessons about financial responsibility and the dangers of rampant consumerism. But I will admit, there are times when I'm reading this where Becky Bloomwood's train of thought are eerily similar to my own. I just hope that I have a little bit more self-control and a little bit more self-awareness than she did. 2001, we have Georgiana's World by Amanda Foreman, the illustrated version of her biography for Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire. I read this in 2020 and it was the history book that really made me realise how integral integrated images are in really opening up histories and really helping readers to plant themselves into a historic world to which they've previously had no context. 2002 saw the publication of The Day the World Came to Town by Jim Defede, which is a memoir chronicling the experiences of Gander, Newfoundland following the 9/11 attacks, the 38 planes which were diverted over to Gander and the townspeople who took them in. Once again, we have another book which inspired a musical. Take a shot every time this happens in this video, but just a testament to kindness and community, even in the face of something so tragic and horrible. For 2003, I recommend The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. Still to this day, I am in awe of Khaled Hosseini and his skill in plotting and particularly plot twists, so that until the last page, you're never quite sure where you're going to land. For 2004, I recommend Ron Chernow's biography of Alexander Hamilton, Take a Shot, or should I say, Raise a Glass to Freedom, something they can never take away. For 2005, I recommend The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. I read this when I was 18 and it was the book that got me back into reading after 4 years in secondary school of really reading very little. This reminded me of why books are so important, why access to literature is so vital, and the dangers of censorship. For 2006, I recommend Don't Look Now, Clarice Bean by Lauren Child. The Clarice Bean books were such a pivotal part of my childhood, one of my favourite book series as a child, and this third instalment was so much fun. For something a little different, in 2007, the novella The Uncommon Reader by Alan Bennet was published. A very funny, quirky story about what if the Queen of England had stumbled across a library in Buckingham Palace and became so enthralled by reading that she ended up neglecting all of her royal duties. Switching tones once again for 2008, in which I'm going to recommend The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, the book series that got me into dystopias, as I'm sure it did for many kids my age. And I think all these years on, it still really holds up and probably is more poignant and pertinent now than it ever was. For 2009, I recommend Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. This is not the last time that this series is going to feature on this list, but really showcased what great historical fiction can be, how it can really open up a world and really immerse yourselves in the Tudor court. For 2010, I recommend Foster by Claire Keegan. Once again, a testament to what can be accomplished in a novella when the person who is writing it is so skilled and never leaves a word out of place. For 2011, I recommend The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Really one of the books that kickstarted the modern trend of Greek myth retellings, and I think is still the best one. For 2012, I recommend Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking by Susan Cain. I've always been on the quieter side, the introverted side. I feel much more solace and comfort being on my own as opposed to being in a big group of people. It's not to say that I don't like people, but I definitely need that time to recharge and re-energize. It's really important to me, and this was just a great book in reassuring me that I am not odd for wanting that, and that despite a world that wants you to be more outgoing, that can often treat introversion as if it's somehow wrong, that there is a lot of power in it, that there is something good and valuable in being more quiet and introverted. Not that it is better than being extroverted, but that it offers something different that is just as meaningful. For 2013, I recommend Mr. Loverman by Bernardine Evaristo. The character of Barrington Walker is such a fresh, dynamic perspective. Incredibly funny, though incredibly flawed. He's definitely one of the most memorable protagonists I've ever read. For 2014, I recommend The Unknown Unknown, Bookshops and the Delight of Not Getting What You Want by Mark Forsyth. This is a teeny tiny little pamphlet, but it's just an ode to the delight of bookshops, of browsing and not knowing what you're going to pick up next, as opposed to the very curated and restrictive experience of shopping online. For 2015, I had to recommend When a Scot Ties the Knot by Tessa Dare, the book that really got me into romance, and particularly historical romance, and showed me just how much fun historical romance can be. For 2016, I recommend When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi, a book that I will always recommend when the chance comes, since it's the book that made me cry on the London Underground. The poor people around me did not know what to think. For 2017, I recommend When I Hit You by Mina Kantasamy, a book that I am still fuming did not win the Women's Prize for Fiction that year, but is just this haunting portrayal of domestic abuse that still gets me emotional to this day. For 2018, I recommend Jane Seymour, The Haunted Queen by Alison Weir. I always love going back to Alison Weir's historical fiction and seeing the Tudor court through her eyes, and this is by far my favourite of that series, depicting Jane Seymour, who is really probably the least loved of Henry VIII's wives, but this really opens up her world and demonstrates the power that historical fiction can do in opening up these quieter characters from history whom we don't have a lot in the historical record, but giving them a rich internal world and creating compelling characters out of the little that we have. For 2019, of course, I have to recommend Matilda, Empress Queen Warrior by Catherine Hanley. How could I not? I recommend this book all the time. Hashtag justice for Matilda. For 2020, it was inevitable. There were other books I could have chosen, but it wouldn't have been true to what is in my heart. And the recommendation for 2020 that I have for you is The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel. What a fantastic way to end this trilogy. And I had to recommend it because I cried at the end. I cried for Thomas Cromwell. Had you told me prior to reading this series that I would have done such a thing, I would have laughed in your face, but that is the skill of Hilary Mantel. For 2021, I recommend The Language of Food by Annabel Abbs, a really underrated piece of historical fiction looking at Eliza Acton and her creation of a domestic cookbook, which is a love letter to food, but also her female friendship with her servant Anne, who helps her compile it. For 2022, I recommend A Terrible Kindness by Jo Browning-Grow, which is layering so many different things. It talks about the Aberfan disaster, fraught friendships and competitiveness, family relationships, and the power of music in bringing people together and healing old rifts. For 2023, I recommend The Temple of Fortuna by Elodie Harper, another historical fiction trilogy that I absolutely devoured, and this conclusion to it absolutely stuck its landing in a rather explosive way. And then finally, for 2024, I recommend The Instrumentalist by Harriet Constable. Once again, another underrated historical fiction that I've not heard many people talking about, but another historical fiction looking at the power of music, about fraught relationships, gender politics. This is looking at the life of violin prodigy Anna Maria, her relationship to her tutor Antonio Vivaldi, and how their relationship deteriorates when it turns out that he is stealing her work and passing off her compositions for his own. It's just one I think everybody should read. I don't know why it's being slept on. And that is where I'm going to leave you, because really it's March 2025 and what is going to be my favourite book published this year is really anyone's guess. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what this year brings. And since today is my birthday, I'm going to go off and eat a little bit of cake, I think. Or maybe a lot of cake. Probably the latter. Do let me know if you've read any of the books I've spoken to you about today. Alternatively, please let me know what you would have chosen in place of some of these books going year by year. I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic day. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.